When a young boy saw a stranded man by the roadside, he didn't hesitate to help fix a flat tire despite having nothing himself. He had no idea the man was a millionaire. That single act of kindness would unlock a door to a world he never dreamed possible. 12-year-old Elijah Carter never thought twice about helping people. Maybe it was because he had been raised by a mother who taught him that kindness didn't cost a thing. Or maybe it was because when you had so little yourself, you realized how much the smallest gesture could mean. Either way, he didn't see his actions as extraordinary, just necessary. That Tuesday afternoon in early spring, when the clouds hung heavy like a secret waiting to break, Elijah had no idea that his decision to stop and help a stranger would set off a chain of events that would change the course of his life forever. Glenbrook was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, but nobody ever really left. Nestled between the Appalachian foothills and a cluster of forgotten rail lines, Glenbrook had seen better days if it ever really had them. The buildings in town bore the chipped paint of neglect, and even the Welcome to Glenbrook sign tilted like it had given up halfway through its job. Life here was tough, work was scarce, dreams were rarer. Elijah lived in a small, rusted trailer at the edge of a dry cornfield with his mother, Patricia. She was a hard-working woman who cleaned houses during the day and waitressed at the 24-hour diner off Route 7 by night. Her hands were always rough, her eyes always tired, but her smile never failed to bloom when Elijah walked through the door. He was her world, and she was his. They didn't have much, but they had each other and a quiet resilience that held them together. That day, school had let out early, power outage had left the halls darkened, the teachers shrugging in confusion. Elijah had decided to take the long way home. He liked wandering. It helped him clear his mind. He walked past rusting tractors, past barns on the verge of collapse, past fields still scarred from the last hard winter. It was on Old Mill Road, a road so unused, even GPS forgot it existed, that he saw the car. It was a black Mercedes, sleek and shining like a shadow with wheels. Its rear passenger side tire had blown out, leaving the luxury vehicle slumped to one side. A man in a dark blue suit stood next to it, pacing in small, aggravated circles. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with thick salt and pepper hair, and the kind of polished look that didn't belong anywhere near Glenbrook. In his hand, he held a smartphone high in the air like he was trying to catch a signal from heaven. Elijah approached slowly, wary but curious. He could hear the man muttering under his breath. "No signal, no Wi-Fi, and no clue where I am," the man snapped, as if the rural road had personally offended him. "Excuse me, sir," Elijah said, his voice cautious but kind. "Need help?" The man looked up, startled. His eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that usually narrowed first and trusted later. He gave Elijah a quick once-over mud-streaked jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a flannel shirt that had clearly been handed down more times than it had been washed. The boy didn't look like much, but then again, he had come closer when no one else had. "I've got a flat," the man said tersely, "and this place is a dead zone. Can't call roadside assistance, can't get GPS, and I'm probably going to be late to a very important meeting." Elijah nodded, stepping forward. "You got a spare?" "In the trunk, I think. I've never had to change one before. My assistant usually handles that." The man opened the trunk, and Elijah leaned in, grabbing the jack and spare tire like he'd done it 100 times, which he nearly had. His uncle used to run a tiny garage in town, and Elijah had spent many weekends learning the ropes while his mother worked. His hands moved quickly, confidently. He knelt in the dirt, loosening lug nuts with ease. "What's your name, kid?" the man asked, watching Elijah. "Elijah Carter? I'm Thomas Granger." Elijah offered a polite smile, not recognizing the name, and kept working. Thomas watched him with quiet fascination. This kid couldn't be older than 12, yet he worked with the speed and precision of a seasoned mechanic. "Where'd you learn to do this?" Thomas asked. "My uncle, he used to fix cars. I helped out sometimes." Thomas nodded, tucking his phone into his blazer pocket. "Well, I'm impressed," Elijah shrugged. "Just doing what I can." In 15 minutes, the new tire was on and the tools packed away. Elijah wiped his hands on his jeans and stepped back. "You're good to go." Thomas reached for his wallet, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "Here for your trouble." Elijah looked at the money, then back at the man. "That's okay. You don't have to pay me." Thomas blinked. "It's $100. I didn't help you for money." The silence between them was thick with surprise. Thomas, who dealt daily with people who measured worth in dollars and leverage, didn't know what to say. He looked at the boy really, looked this time, saw something rare, honesty, integrity, a kind of pure-hearted generosity that couldn't be bought. "Well," Thomas said slowly, putting the bill back into his wallet. "Thank you anyway." "No problem," Elijah said. "Have a safe drive." With that, he turned and headed off down the road, backpack slung over one shoulder, mud on his shoes, and a soft whistle on his lips. Thomas watched him until he disappeared over the hill. It wasn't until he got back into his car and started the engine that something inside Thomas Granger began to shift. Thomas Granger was not a man easily shaken. CEO of Granger Tech, a billion-dollar tech firm headquartered in Manhattan, he'd built his empire from the ground up, Raised in a cramped apartment in Detroit by a single mother who worked herself into an early grave, Thomas had clawed his way out of poverty with nothing but grit, numbers, and an unrelenting will to win. Along the way, he'd forgotten what it meant to slow down, to look people in the eye, to appreciate anything that wasn't listed on a balance sheet. But Elijah Carter's face haunted him all the way back to the hotel. That night, while sipping a glass of scotch on the balcony of his suite, Thomas replayed the moment in his mind, the boy's hands deftly changing the tire, the honest refusal of money, the cheerful have a safe drive. It gnawed at him in a way he couldn't quite explain. He picked up his phone, dialed his assistant, and said, "I want to know everything about a boy named Elijah Carter, and start with the auto shop he mentioned and uncle. Quietly, please." The next morning, Thomas drove himself back into town. He stopped by the only auto shop within 10 miles and casually inquired about a boy named Elijah. The owner, a burly man with grease-stained hands, smiled. "Elijah, that boy's a gem, helps out any time he can. Smart as a whip, too. Lives with his mom in the trailers out by Miller's Field." That night, Thomas sat with a printout of everything his assistant could dig up. Patricia Carter, 2 jobs, no college, father not in the picture. Elijah, top of his class, known for helping others, never in trouble, gifted in science and math. A teacher had written a note in his school file. "Elijah has the kind of mind that could build bridges or rocket ships. Someone gave him the chance." Thomas stared at the page. He didn't believe in fate, but he believed in opportunity, and Elijah Carter was opportunity, wrapped in humility. Walking down dirt roads with his head held high, back in Glenbrook, strange things began happening. A week later, Elijah's science teacher handed him a brand new laptop. "This was sent to the school," she said, clearly baffled. "Addressed to you. No note, no name." Elijah's eyes widened. "Me. It's yours," she said. "Looks like someone thinks you're going places." His mother cried when he brought it home. 2 days after that, he received a manila envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to a prestigious STEM summer program in New York City, tuition fully paid, travel expenses covered, all anonymous. And then, the letter came. "Elijah, when you help someone, sometimes the world helps you back. Keep doing what you're doing, you're going places." Friend Elijah folded the letter carefully and placed it in his backpack, his heart racing. He didn't know who was behind it all, but somewhere, deep down, he had a feeling, and he was right. The invitation felt like a dream. Elijah was afraid to wake up from every morning. Since the envelope arrived, he checked it 3 times, once when he woke up, once before he left for school, and once before bed. The glossy brochure for the Northeast Institute for Young Innovators looked like something from a movie. Soaring glass buildings, smiling teenagers flying drones and building robots, and phrases like "tomorrow's leaders begin here." Elijah didn't know how he'd ended up on their radar, but someone somehow had made sure he would be part of it. Patricia Carter had read the invitation 5 times before she sat down on the faded floral couch and just cried. She didn't cry often, but this was too much. Her son was smart, brilliant, even, but this kind of opportunity didn't fall into the laps of kids from Glenbrook, and definitely not into the hands of kids whose mothers cleaned houses and waited tables to make ends meet. Yet, there it was. A full scholarship, travel paid for, room and board covered, no strings attached. "I don't know who sent this," she whispered, clutching the letter with shaking fingers. "But they're changing your life, Eli." Elijah didn't say anything. He couldn't. He was too stunned, too awash with a mixture of fear and excitement. Glenbrook had been his entire world. He'd never even been on a plane before, but something inside him, some flicker of hope, told him that this was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Elijah stood at the tiny county airport in a pair of new shoes that still felt too stiff and a button-up shirt that someone had donated through the school. A guidance counselor had helped him get a duffel bag together, and the principal himself had driven him to the airport, shaking his hand like he was sending off a senator. "Make us proud," the principal had said. "We've never had a student get picked for something like this." When the plane took off, Elijah pressed his forehead against the window and watched Glenbrook shrink beneath him. The rows of patchy fields, the crooked rooftops, the familiar bends in the road, all of it looked so small from up here. He didn't know whether to feel afraid or free. New York City wasn't just another place, it was another planet. The moment Elijah stepped off the plane and into the terminal, he was swallowed by the noise, the energy, the swirl of color and sound. People rushed by in every direction, talking into Bluetooth headsets, dragging sleek suitcases, dressed in clothes that looked like they came from magazines. Elijah's wide eyes darted around, trying to take it all in. A driver holding a sign with his name, Elijah Carter, was waiting near the baggage claim. He wore a sharp black suit and smiled warmly when Elijah approached. "Mr. Carter," he said, opening the car door. "Welcome to New York." The ride to the Institute took nearly an hour, weaving through towering buildings, flashing billboards, and crowds thicker than anything Elijah had ever seen. The city pulsed with life, with ambition. Everything here was faster, louder, bigger, but beneath Elijah's awe, there was something else, too, a fire lighting in his chest. He didn't just want to survive here. He wanted to belong. When the car pulled up in front of the Northeast Institute for Young Innovators, Elijah's jaw dropped. The building looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Glass, steel, and concrete fused into a sleek, modern campus that shimmered beneath the city's skyline. Other students, all around his age, were arriving with suitcases, parents, and nervous laughter. Elijah walked through the front doors alone, clutching the letter in his hand like a passport to another life. A kind woman with silver glasses and a name tag reading Dr. Rivera greeted him at the registration desk. Elijah Carter, she said, scanning her list. Yes, you've been flagged for the advanced engineering cohort. Someone very generous made sure you'd have everything you need while you're here. Elijah blinked. Do you know who it was? She smiled. Some donors prefer to remain anonymous, but they must think very highly of you. He swallowed and nodded, unsure what to say. It was all happening so fast. The next week was a whirlwind. Elijah's days were packed with robotics labs, coding challenges, design thinking workshops, and lectures from top scientists and engineers. At first he felt out of place. Some of the other students had already built their own apps or competed in national competitions. They wore smartwatches and talked about summer internships like it was normal. But it didn't take long for Elijah's talent to shine. By the end of the second day, he was leading a small team and designing a bridge model that could hold 10 times the required weight. A visiting professor from MIT called his math work elegant. Another instructor praised his instincts, saying he thought like an inventor, not just a student. And while Elijah still felt like he was catching up socially, his mind moved like lightning in the labs. One night, after a particularly long workshop on renewable energy systems, Elijah sat alone in the quiet dorm lounge, flipping through one of the engineering books he'd borrowed from the institute's library. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, everything felt surreal. He thought about his mother, probably just getting off her shift at the diner. He thought about Glenbrook, about the cracked pavement on Old Mill Road, about the stranger in the blue suit, and then, for the second time, another envelope appeared in his dorm mailbox. It was the same as before, plain, no return address. Inside was another typed letter. You're not dreaming, Elijah. You earned this. Keep solving problems. Keep asking questions. We're watching and cheering you on. This time, there was something else too, a business card. On it was a simple, embossed name, Granger Foundation. Elijah stared at the card, heart pounding. He remembered the name Thomas Granger, the man with the flat tire. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Thomas Granger hadn't intended to get this involved at first. He'd told himself it was just about giving a good kid a small boost. A quiet scholarship, a couple of resources, but something about Elijah Carter wouldn't let him go. The boy reminded him of himself at that age, brilliant, underestimated, stuck in a world too small for his mind. Thomas had grown up in a city much like Glenbrook. He'd known hunger, isolation, and the bitterness of watching opportunity pass you by. It was a miracle that he'd made it out. Maybe now, all these years later, he had a chance to pay that miracle forward. So yes, he pulled strings. He called directors. He offered donations. He made sure Elijah got into the institute. He ensured the best mentors were assigned to him. He even tracked Elijah's progress weekly through a private email summary from Dr. Rivera. Still, he didn't reach out directly. He didn't want to interrupt the boy's journey or scare him off. He just wanted to make sure the path ahead was clear. Until the phone call came. Mr. Granger. Dr. Rivera's voice crackled over the speakerphone. I thought you should know. Elijah Carter won first place in the Renewable Futures Design showcase today. He built a working model of a wind turbine using scrap materials and then connected it to a backup battery grid. Thomas leaned back in his leather office chair, lips curling into a smile. You don't sound surprised. I'm not, she said. The boy's extraordinary. He just needed the world to see it. That night, Thomas made a decision. The next morning, Elijah was called into the main conference room, an area normally reserved for visiting executives and guest speakers. Confused, he walked in to find a man already seated at the long glass table. It was him, Thomas Granger, the man from the road. His suit was the same sharp navy, but this time there was no flat tire, just an air of calm authority and quiet pride. You remember me? Thomas asked, standing. Elijah nodded slowly. Yeah, you needed help with your car. Thomas chuckled. That was the day everything changed, Elijah, for both of us. They sat, the silence comfortable, respectful. I'm the one who sent the letters, Thomas said finally. The scholarship? The laptop? The institute invitation? Elijah's eyes widened, but he said nothing. I didn't do it as charity, Thomas continued. I did it because I saw something rare in you: humility, brilliance, and heart. Most people wouldn't stop to help a stranger. You did, and that told me everything I needed to know. Why me? Elijah finally asked, his voice low. Thomas leaned forward. Because someone once did the same for me. When I was your age, I was just like you, smart, poor, invisible. One day a man believed in me. I never forgot that, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to pass it on. He pulled out a thin folder and slid it across the table. Inside was an offer, a mentorship, an internship, and a full academic scholarship through Granger Tech's Young Future Leaders program covering high school, college, and beyond. You won't be alone anymore, Elijah, Thomas said. We'll help you build whatever you want to build. You're not just going to watch the future, you're going to create it. Elijah stared at the papers, his hands trembling. This was real. All of it. And it all started with a flat tire. He looked up, eyes glistening. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Thomas stood and offered his hand. I know you won't. They shook hands, and just like that, a door opened wide and Elijah Carter stepped through it. Years passed like pages turning in a well-worn book, and Elijah Carter filled each one with a story worth reading. After accepting Thomas Granger's offer, Elijah entered a new chapter of life where hard work finally met opportunity. With his tuition covered and mentorship from one of the world's most successful tech minds, Elijah thrived like a spark caught in dry kindling. His brilliance didn't just shine, it burned. By the time he turned 15, he had already completed college engineering courses online. At 16, he was developing algorithms that gained attention from MIT, and at 17, he was the youngest ever intern to lead a design team at Granger Tech, helping develop a modular solar array for off-grid rural areas, a project inspired by his own community's struggles with power outages and outdated infrastructure. He never forgot Glenbrook, not once. While the city cheered his success and media outlets called him a boy genius, Elijah always brought the conversation back to his roots. In every interview, every keynote he was invited to speak at, he said the same thing. It started with a flat tire. I didn't do anything special. I just helped someone. The rest was someone helping me back. By 18, Elijah was already preparing to attend Stanford on a Granger Tech Fast Track Fellowship. But before he left for California, he had one last thing to do. He was going home. The sun hung low over the fields of Glenbrook, casting long golden rays across the familiar patch of land where his journey began. The town hadn't changed much. The same leaning sign welcomed visitors with a half-hearted greeting. The same cracked sidewalks wound through tired streets, and the same rusting farm equipment stood as silent sentinels of a different time. But something in the air felt different. Something about this visit wasn't just nostalgic, it was monumental. Elijah arrived in a modest electric sedan, sleek and quiet, as if to avoid making too grand an entrance. He was taller now, leaner, with eyes that held confidence but none of the arrogance some might expect from a teenager. Dubbed the future of American innovation by Wired magazine, he pulled into the diner where his mother still worked, though now only part-time by his insistence. Patricia Carter nearly dropped a tray when she saw her son step inside, dressed not in a suit but in jeans and a hoodie, just like old times. She ran to him, wrapping him in a hug that made every long hour and missed birthday worth it. You're home, she whispered, pulling back to study his face. For a little while, Elijah said, but I've got something planned. He didn't tell her what's, at least not yet. Later that week, word spread like wildfire. Elijah Carter's building something. Did you hear? They're renovating the old mill. He's funding a tech center for kids. And it was true. Elijah had taken a portion of his early earnings, matched by the Granger Foundation, and purchased the abandoned warehouse where Glenbrook's textile mill once thrived. Within months, it would become the Carter Center for Innovation, an opportunity, a free STEM hub for rural youth. Robotics labs, 3D printers, coding classes, scholarships, and mentorships, all available to kids who, like Elijah, might have brilliance buried beneath poverty and obscurity. When he stood before the town council to announce the project, the room was packed wall-to-wall. Teachers, neighbors, reporters, old friends, and more than a few kids who looked up at him with wide eyes and big dreams. Some of you knew me when I was just a kid with muddy shoes and a wrench in my hand, Elijah said, scanning the crowd. Some of you helped raise me, or fed me, or gave me secondhand books. I never forgot that, and I never will. This center is for every kid who's ever felt stuck, who's ever been told they can't. You can. I'm living proof. There was silence for a heartbeat and then thunderous applause. Thomas Granger watched from the back row, arms folded, pride written all over his face. Afterward, the two met quietly outside near the lot where the old mill smokestacks once rose like dying fingers. You didn't have to come, Elijah said, smiling. Thomas raised a brow. Miss this? Not a chance. They stood side by side, looking over the scaffolding and fresh paint. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't pulled over that day? Thomas asked, folding his arms. I do, Elijah said. Every day. Thomas glanced at him. You made this happen, Elijah. I opened a door. You built the house. Elijah nodded, thoughtful. You know what's wild? I don't think the flat tire was an accident. Thomas laughed. So you believe in fate now? Not fate, just alignment, Elijah said. The universe has a funny way of paying attention when you do the right thing. Months passed. The Carter Center opened in a ceremony attended by national news outlets and state officials. Kids from all across the region applied to join its programs. Elijah, now a freshman at Stanford, flew back monthly to oversee operations and teach classes remotely when he couldn't be there in person. A small team of educators and engineers, funded by Granger Tech and later Google and the Gates Foundation, helped expand the curriculum. But the moment that shook the world came. A year later, at just 19, Elijah Carter was named Time magazine's most influential people list. In his interview, he wore his signature blue hoodie and told the story again of a stranger with a flat tire and a decision to help without asking for anything in return. That single moment, he told them, changed to lives and, maybe more than that. But what truly stunned the world was what came next. At a UN Youth Forum on climate and access to technology, Elijah gave a keynote address that made headlines across the globe. He unveiled Project LEAP Localized Energy Access Platform, a solar-powered microgrid system, small enough to fit in a suitcase, powerful enough to provide lighting, internet, and refrigeration to an entire rural household for up to 7 days on a single charge. Designed using principles he first experimented with in Book and built in partnership with Granger Tech. Project LEAP promised to revolutionize access to energy in underserved areas from Appalachian towns to villages in sub-Africa. In his speech, Elijah said, "No one should have to choose between homework and electricity. No one should be invisible because of where they're born. Innovation isn't just about tech, it's about equity." That speech was shared, quoted, and replayed for months, and always. The narrative came back to the same thing. A boy from nowhere helped a man with a flat tire, and now, he was helping the world. Back in Glenbrook, the diner still stood. So did the trailers. Life didn't magically become perfect, but it became possible. And for many, that was enough. Kids began dreaming differently. Parents began believing differently. And somewhere on Old Mill Road, there's now a small bronze plaque near the curve where Thomas Granger once found himself stranded. It reads, "At this spot a boy chose kindness over convenience. That boy became a light in the world. May we all be so brave." Elijah Carter reads it every time he comes home. Because no matter how far he goes, no matter how many stages he speaks on, or inventions he unveils, he never forgets where he came from, and he never forgets how it all began, with mud on his sneakers and a choice to help.